Today, we have the pleasure of having with us in this series of podcasts about exemplar leaders, we have Tony Leung Shing, the senior partner in PwC Mauritius. So, welcome, Tony. Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, pleasure, Raquel. Pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure.
Yes.
So, thank you for being here, and I'm excited. I'm really waiting for you to share your insights about development for this podcast of exemplar leaders.
Yeah, I'm really excited to share my experience and try and promote better leaders.
So, Tony, can you tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, and as a leader, how would you describe your leadership style?
Okay, as a leader, I would say I'm a collaborative leader in the sense that I seek to obtain multidimensional perspective in terms of trying to get inclusiveness, trying to understand the different views and to get consensus. And I also tend to, let's say, leverage on relationships in terms of trying to understand the individual people in my team, to build trust through my authenticity and transparency and honesty as a leader. Taking all that, what I try to achieve is also empower my people, given that they understood, the clarity of the purpose, I've got their buy-in, then I really delegate and empower them with little, hands-on in terms of, and whole autonomy in terms of them delivering. That's how I would kind of describe my leadership style.
Excellent. Sounds very, very interesting. So, when you hear the term systemic development, what comes to your mind? Because this has become like the primary focus over the past few years and new beginnings. And we're interested to expand our own landscape of what this means. So, how would you describe in your own words, with your own meanings, with your thoughts, what systemic development means? What is it that comes to your mind when you hear systemic development?
So for me, systemic development, what it means is a deep understanding of self. And it starts with the individual person himself. So understanding of their purpose, the values, and the beliefs. Then also how that individual develop relationships in terms of rapport building, in terms of empathy or the trust and how he builds that. And once you have that deep understanding of self, is how then you lead in terms of your leadership style, in terms of your strengths, in terms of how you inspire and vision in terms of the organization. And then having that understanding of self and how it impacts on your leadership, how you influence the system and the organization as a whole. But then there's also a component where the organization also impact on your leadership style and yourself in terms of the stakeholders, in terms of the complexity of the system and the organization itself, as well as the future fit of the organization. So it's really a complex intricacies between self, leadership, and system. And the whole thing about systemic development is the alignment and the integration of all these component parts.
That's a very enlightening answer. Thank you. So, Tony, what do you believe about leadership development and organizational development? You told me a bit about it already, actually. But maybe you can tell me about organizational wise. What are your personal views about that?
For me, leadership and organization are, intrinsically linked, and the development of the two parts are very related. As a leader, you would develop and push the organization development. And the organization also needs to support the leadership development. So both on the part of the leadership and also on the part of the organization, you need to develop certain traits like agility, both from the leader, both from the organization, Agility in terms of equipping either the leader with the necessary skills or the organization with the necessary resources in order to build resilience, in order to be adaptable to new environments. And both on the leadership and the organization as well, there needs to be a culture of growth and learning in order for both to push themselves and stress themselves, that culture of mindset of growth and learning needs to be enabled both from the leader and the organization, because both would push each other and enabling that development to happen.
Tony, could you tell us how you develop yourself? What are the tools that you use to develop yourself? And what stands out for you about what you learned about yourself?
Okay, in terms of self-development, I must say, I grew up in an environment where my parents put a lot of emphasis on pushing ourselves to excel. And at the time it was a lot about academics, but to try and better version of yourself. So right when I was growing up, I had that sense of self-improvement already in there. And my journey on self-development really started when I moved from the Mauritius to the UK for my university studies, and where I found gaps in terms of my personal abilities, especially in terms of communication. Standing in front of people talking for me was very difficult at start. So at the time, my first touch with self-development was really self-taught, trial and error, observation, and seeing people do, and I tried different things. So that was my early stage of self-development, self-taught, and trial and error. Then I also moved to, let's say, more formal training, like technical training, because that's where I'm an accountant, so that's where I'm trying to build knowledge and understanding. I went through a lot of qualification. I did my bachelor's degree, I did my MBA, I did 2 professional qualifications, and that was really in search of technical excellence, improving myself. Then, through my career as you progress, the technical side becomes less important, and then where you need to develop a little bit more your leadership skills. And that's where, for me, the self-improvement side became more important. And that self-improvement, again, you do a little bit of reading, a little bit of listening to different podcasts like we're doing here today, but also more formalized training, like, what I've been doing with newbie in terms of coaching. So it's been a combination throughout my life, just, formal and informal. And it's a journey of constant self-discovery and pushing yourself outside the comfort zone.
Good. Very good. So, how do you think that your own interest in self-development, as you were telling me, has influenced others?
A tough one, eh? I think how I try to influence others is by being that role model, that kind of leader they can follow and lead by example. So I try to model the behaviors I want to see in them, and so that they can see how that feels and how that looks in practice. So that's one part of how I try to influence the people I lead or who is part of my organization. Then the other part I do as well is coaching. It's not, I always want to do more of that, is the coaching and mentoring side, where, it's really about spending time to know the people, to understand their core values and their purpose, and trying to help them in achieving their goals and their objectives. But having different level of conversation as part of the coaching. So a lot of the time you have just some kind of regular check-in, then you have some feedback and some more confrontational and development organization. So it's part of that coaching framework. Then for the other part where it's been more difficult is to create that safe environment, that psychological safety for them to experience new behaviors and tools and technique, because yes, you can try and coach them, but if you don't provide them with the right environment for them to thrive and experience, then it's going to be very difficult, because what you're doing then is trying to penalize, their mistakes, while, they should be allowed to express and to experience something. So that's how I try to, create not only the through my leadership style, but also creating a conducive environment.
Good. So Tony, many leaders do not understand what executive coaching or team coaching is. So what would you say that is, and how that helps to your own leadership?
Okay. Yes, for me, executive coaching is, the individual part. So looking at the executive on an individual basis, so trying to help them to understand their purpose, their values, their emotions, and how they build relationship and rapport. And team coaching is all about the aspect of collaboration, of team dynamics, of relationship between the different executives, but not only the relationship between the different executives, but the space as well between those different executives, and how together in that team they build a common purpose and also the accountability of that team. So for me as a leader, I need a combination of both the executive coaching and the team coaching, because both are required in order to lead the organization forward. One element of self-growth in the executive, but also that self-growth cannot be in isolation, because it's always in respect of the organization as a whole and as sub-teams. So that's why for me, the two again here are linked and are important in terms of me achieving my leadership kind of objectives.
Okay. What are the 3 or 4 key learnings which you believe achieve leadership success?
Leadership success. I think for me, success is not instant. Yeah. And I shared many times before, I haven't achieved success instantly. I've failed my exams 3 times before achieving success. And I think through the failure and having to dig in myself and having to find, the true self has actually helped me build resilience and self-belief, which has been the foundation of my success today. So through failure and digging deep, that has enabled a solid foundation of self-belief and resilience. Then I also think my being truthful to myself, my authentic self, knowing the talk and what I stand for, has also led me to be a more impactful leader, a more believable leader, because people see what I talk and they don't see a disconnect between what I say and what I do. So for me, that's been one of the other foundation of my success. And the third, maybe final part is around being able to inspire others in terms of becoming a better version of themselves, in terms of stretching the boundaries, in terms of innovating. And I always say doing the same thing over and over again lead to the same results. And if you want to achieve, disruptions or achieve growth, you always need to try and reimagine the possibilities. Always try to innovate, and you need to be able to inspire people in that direction. So I would say these 3 aspects, has kind of been my recipe to success.
And Tony, maybe people want to hear about challenges.
Yeah.
tough one. So let's talk about challenges. Can you share with us, as a leader, one of the biggest challenges that you have, because you are responsible for how many people?
430,
430 people, with all their idiosyncrasies, all their problems, all the things. So, could you tell me what is as a leader, one of the greatest challenges you face on a daily basis, and how you overcome it?
Yeah, I think I talked from the start, my style of leadership is a collaborative style. And the first challenge I had when I became senior partner was to really get people used to that style of leadership, because in the past they've been used to a more command and control style, and having that collaborative kind of non-directive style, some people felt lost in terms of following that kind of way of leading. So I had some kind of resistance before, at first, in terms of, when I first became that senior partner. And I had to overcome that part. And for me, that was a big challenge. Again, we attached to that collaborative style, what I found challenging was to build coherence and a team mindset. Before, the organization was really operating in silos and were really looking for their own kind of objectives. And developing that kind of coherence in team thinking was one of the biggest challenges. And that's where the team coaching was very valuable in creating that common understanding, common purpose and goal in terms of developing that team mindset. And the final thing is, we've a growing, trying to promote learning and development, is the vulnerability attached to that. And us as leaders, we are expected to know everything. And the first thing I put in place was one of the partner coaching program, and that was totally new because people see you as having made it up there. Why do you need coaching? Why does he not know? I mean, we expect him to teach us, and he's being taught. So what does he know? So is not worrying too much about your image management and being open to those vulnerabilities has also been really a challenge, because it's been a new way of leading. So for me, those are kind of the different components of what I found challenging with my style of leadership.
Amazing. I think we have it. Let me write, because you gave me a very good idea of the superhero thing.
Superhero?
They expect you to be a superhero.
Do they?
I guess so. That's what you just said. Like, actually, when you're a CEO, people expect you to be a superhero, know everything and mentor them. They don't. Maybe there's a lack of culture of understanding that what executive coaching is, or team coaching is, or tools for development. And because of that lack of culture, what would you say that Mauritius needs in terms of leaders?
I think we are in a kind of society where once you become the leader, you become that superhero, that superpower, where you are expected to know everything, and you are supposed to see strong and show no vulnerabilities. And for me, what I've found is that the skills and the kind of attributes that brought me to the senior partner role are not necessarily the skills that I may need to make the organization evolve or take the organization to the next level. So my say to Mauritian leaders is be prepared to change and to grow. As part of taking the organization or your organization forward, you would want to change your organization. By changing the organization, you also need to be prepared to change yourself as well as part of the process.
amazing and inspiring. So, thank you very much for being part of this series of podcasts about development. Tony, Leung, Shing, thank you for being here.
Araka, pleasure talking to you. And I hope the audience really enjoy the chat.